Hi, welcome to According to Luke. So today we're going to look at the beginning of the Gospel according to John, specifically John 1:1, where John tells us, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." It's important for us to have a grasp of the original Koine Greek in which John wrote this, to be able to understand and defend this verse as it's intended in the original context. We're going to look at this tricolon as John gives us as in a triadic structure, so we'll take each distinct part one at a time. We'll start with John 1:1a, and it says, "In the beginning was the Word." In the Koine Greek it says, "NRK ein ha logos." NRK, this points us, or John is pointing us to Genesis 1:1. When the Hebrew Scriptures is translated into Greek, these are the exact same words as the Old Testament begins with, "in the beginning." The next word, "was," or "ein," is in the imperfect tense. Now this is important. For example, later in the Gospel according to John, when the Lord Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am," those "I am" statements, ego eimi, that word eimi is the same root as this word ein. This word ein is just in the imperfect tense, so it means a continuous existence with no point of origin. So John's not saying or trying to indicate any point of origin of the word, but showing us that in the beginning of time, the Word was existing continuously and continued to exist. So, NRK ein ha logos. In the beginning was the Word. Now, in 1:1b, it says, "And the Word was with God." And in the original language, it says, "Kai ha logos ein prostanteon." Kai, the conjunction, and ha logos, the Word, which we know as the Lord Jesus Christ, prior to the incarnation, was a continuous exist prostanteon. Pros means that he was face-to-face or in direct communion, in personal communion with. Now we have some specificity to the next part where it says tanteon, or the God. Ton is the definite article, so like I said, there's some specificity to it, and as we continue down in the first chapter of John, he tells us that this is referring to the specific person of the Father. So we have the when of the Word in 1:1a. We have the who and the where. The who is that he is distinct from the Father, and the where he was with in close personal communion or face-to-face with the Father. So in 1:1c we have the what of the Word, and it says kai theos ein ha logos. So there's a few things to point out that's very important in 1:1c, and one is it begins with theos. This is an anarthrous preverbal predicate nominative. Anarthrous simply means that there's no definite article. It's lacking the definite article. And theos, kai theos, was, or ein ha logos. So the Word was God. Now, as most of you probably know, people such as the JWs in their translation of the Bible say that the Word was a God. Now, to justify this, they like to point out at the fact that in this phrase is anarthrous, or lacking the definite article, so that, and they say, is automatically makes it indefinite. So we can rightly supply that and say the Word was a God. But I don't think it's that simple. Some of you may have heard of the Granville-Sharp rule when it comes to Koine Greek rules. And if you've looked further into this, maybe you've run across Caldwell's rule. Caldwell's rule tells us that basically the anarthrous preverbal predicate nominative is usually definite. Now, first thing we can observe when looking into this is it's an observation. It's not so much a rule. So we can rightly call it Caldwell's construction. But if you look a little further, this gets refined later on by a man named Philip Harner. And Harner's rule says that the anarthrous preverbal predicate nominative is qualitative. He does this by examining all of the Same anarthrous, preverbal, predicate, nominative cases in the Gospel according to John, of which there are 53. Now 51 of them, which is 96%, are not indefinite. There's only 2, which is roughly 4%, that are the exception. So for us to make John 1:1 exception, we would have to have a substantial amount of proof, in which we don't because of the grammatical structure of this verse. It indicates that we must follow the rule that this is qualitative. This is discussing the whatness or the essence or the substance or the nature of the Word. The Word is God. The Word was God. So we do not have a definite article here, which John specifically leaves out, because if he was to add it in, then it would conflate 1:1b, where it says he was with God, with the God, and this would be talking about the same person. But he doesn't give the definite article, but that doesn't make it indefinite either. So we have a distinction in persons, but here in 1:1c we're referring to the essence or the quality of the Word. Being qualitative, the Word was God. It's important for us to look a little bit deeper into these verses, specifically into the original language, so we can rightly defend against theories of, especially concerning the deity of Christ, when John is using very specific language to indicate exactly when, who, where, and what the Word, the Lord Jesus Christ, is. So I appreciate you all taking the time to check that out, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.